Hi, everyone. How's it going? Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. It's great to see all your faces. Such a wide variety of experience here. We're really excited to chat. So my name is Laura Seacat. I am the Quality Assurance and Continuous Improvement Program Manager, I know it's a mouthful, of Finn's own CS team. And tonight is something really close to my heart, delivering high quality AI experiences. So really excited to hear what Brian and Matthias have to say. Hopefully after that you'll stick around, we can network a bit, chat a bit. And also over here, you might have seen when you walked in, we have the Finn Labs set up. Basically, if you want a hands-on look at the products we're actually speaking about, we'd love to take you through them. And yeah, without further ado, I'll hand you over to Brian and Matthias.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks everyone for coming here. So I'm Brian. I'm on the product team at Intercom. Matthias, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. I'm Matthias, and I'm one of the software engineers on the linear team. Work on the linear agent, among other things, a lot these days.
And I'm an old timer at Intercom. I've been there a dozen years. So I think he stopped counting at some point at that point there in tech. And I've worked across the breadth of the product, but really the last 3 years focused on Finn. So let's see how much juice we can squeeze from this topic of quality. There's a lot of juice to squeeze. So let's start off with like high quality. What the hell does that mean in the world of AI?
I think like in a lot of cases, right, like there's very quantitative things that people think about when looking at agents and the quality of them. But to a very large part, it's like a vibe-based thing, right? Like you feel when you work with an agent that you give it tasks, you tell it to do stuff, and it does them the way that you would expect it to, and it does so consistently, and you can rely on it to do more and more of your work. And I think like that's hard to capture in numbers, but you kind of know it when you see it, as it is with any quality-related stuff in product building, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting. So how much it varies from like when we're using AI in our assessment of quality, which is pretty quick of like, oh yeah, if you're in the vibe coding, I think we just call it coding now, right? It's all vibe coding now, so it's just coding now. But our assessment of quality there is like, oh shit, I should probably, if you ask in Claude to check your metrics, like, wait, I should probably double check something here, right? Because, but when you're building product that your customers are using, it changes. And I was thinking for, like there's multiple different levels and layers of it. So like when I'm reflecting of how we've defined quality, we have the Finn agent that end users use. So our customers buy our product to then put Finn in front of their customers. And so for the metrics that their end customers receive, we actually have like a mix of them. And like you're saying, there's like, we're fortunate that we can have some that are more objective behavior defined metrics, which sometimes is hard, like a resolution rate, which is, did it actually go to human? So there's still some squishiness in that. And then we go further of like, hey, did the person actually, we call it a hard resolution. Did they actually say, yes, that answered my question? And that's like the most reliable thing where you can actually trust that one there. And then, but then it gets, we also look at CX score and CSAT score, which is then more subjective, but it's kind of like the end user framing it. So it still has some credibility. And then we've got like LLMs judging things on hallucination rates, which are super hard to figure out, and like, did it follow guidance there? And so for us, though, for the end user, also because we're the scale, and means we can use those as those are like our gold benchmarks and run A/B tests across everything. And what that enables us to do of like the challenge of building unpredictability of AI is, how is it affecting those metrics? So I don't know if you see this, where frequently you've got these trade-offs of like, you've got latency, you've got resolution rate, and you've got CSAT or CX score, what you're doing. And here's like an example of memory. Like of course your agent should have memory, right? Clearly that's a better thing. But yet when we built in memory the first time, it dropped resolution rate like 0.5%. We're like, crap, okay, so we could iterate more on there, but we haven't yet. We haven't put it back in because it was negative there. So curious if you've had to like weigh this sort of trade-offs between different types of metrics or like feedback, or how you're weighing stuff up.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think like we're not a very metric-driven culture at Linear generally. Like we don't do any A/B testing. We have metrics, but like I think for a lot of cases, it's also about like the experience that you're trying to drive is very much determined by the way that you architect things. And I think like with agents, that is equally true as it was with products before this, where like in a lot of cases you can kind of intuitively sense if you've built something reasonably good and then confirm that with like seeing users happily interact with it. But there's always trade-offs of like, I think especially around latency, like you don't want to be waiting forever for like something that's normally a very snappy and quick interaction. And like the trade-offs tend to be more in like, can you hit the right quality at a latency level that makes it still feel interactive and like a good product feature? Or does it get to a point where like, the agent has to do so much thinking or research where it's actually not really that like pleasant of a feature anymore. So I think that the trade-offs that we live are usually about like these user experience things where we try to find like how does the agent react to a certain query? Can we make that snappy? Can we make it like pick up on the user's context as smoothly as possible so that they don't have to spend time steering the agent and kind of like drive towards an agent where that like everything sort of falls into place as much as possible.
Latency is an interesting one because again, like memory, it seems like, of course, memory would be good to build in an agent, and latency, which is, of course, you want it to be as fast as possible. But we actually found there's a point at which people don't trust it if it's too fast, because like, how could you figure it out that fast? Which does, of course, doesn't make sense because it's LLM, right, working. But so actually, a little latency. There was a point where like we might need to force the latency to be higher, and then it came back to the reverse where we're trying to bring it down. But this is like the curious human reactions to things of like shorter latency isn't necessarily a good thing in all situations. But then you can have like voice where it's voice, you really want it to be fast. Whereas chat, you can be a little more patient with it. Email doesn't matter at all. So, but I'm curious when you're talking about like how, when customers were using it and kind of like using them as the criteria there of like, is it passing their threshold for good enough? Can you talk more about that? What was that? How did you do that? Was that just feedback, or what sort of system did you have to put in place there, or if anything?
Yeah, we use like traces of our agent a lot. This is like we're very privacy sensitive at Linear, and we like don't really want to see your data, but we do like want to have a good insight of what the agent is doing. So like there is a way that you can opt into like giving us feedback and basically flag conversations that were good or particularly bad. We get a lot of insight from that from people like trying to do things and like either they're super excited about what they're seeing or they're very negative about it, or it's also usually a reasonable signal if like a lot of people are using it and nobody's churning off of it. I think besides that, what we've tried to leverage a little bit recently is like having the agent itself report things that a user asks it and it's not able to do, for example, which gives us like a lot of insight in features that we should be building because users expect it from the agent, but it wasn't able to fulfill their request. I think that's like really helped us stay on the pulse of like how are people using the agent in ways that we have not envisioned and that we need to build support for to make them like intuitively be able to use the agent as they expect it to work.
It's interesting when you're talking about the culture that the product culture you came from that was wary of metrics driving it, and like we don't want A/B tests defining what good looks like for us, and we came from a similar space in the not a metrics driven product org. And interesting, like our AI group, which has grown and influenced way more about how we do things, has really challenged that for us. And so that, which we're still, they're like, you can't ship things because you think they're better. You got to check against these metrics here when you have that sort of scale that we can do some of those things with the end user conversation. But that's been a challenge that we've kind of navigated with really like two separate R&D orgs of an AI group who's like rigor science, and therefore it's all testing, and a product org that was more like just customer driven, intuition driven, validate with the customers there. I think another thing you touched on that's really interesting is that AI, which, hey, there's a lot of folks have a bunch of metrics that they're comparing against. But then I think almost everyone comes back to individual conversation reports. And this is like, you're kind of simultaneously working at the highest level of the macro numbers, and then the individual conversations are every single one of those, and like needing to fine tune or kind of react to each one. You try to group them some, but I just think it's so interesting how it just zooms down to the singular example. And iterating based on lots of singular examples. Does that resonate for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think for us, it's often a process of trying to find things that the agent is doing wrong in a certain consistent way that you can kind of identify the patterns. And it's very hard to identify the patterns with just data-driven analysis in this case, right? Like it's like trying to teach a human to do something. Like sometimes they're making mistakes because you have not like built a good UI for them. And for agents, it's very similar. Like if you don't give agent good tools, if you don't tell them how to go through doing what they need to do, then they'll make predictable mistakes, and it's very hard to like tease that out of the data without looking at individual examples, trying to like get a feel for where is the agent going wrong, like what does it not understand, and how can we help it make itself better at that.
Yeah. Another space I was thinking of is something that took way more effort than we expected was the CX score, which was basically like, hey, instead of relying on your customers to give CSAT, you get bad response rates and you never have the coverage. We should try to use AI to do this. And we train it off like a golden data set of human evaluated conversations. So not even what the end user said, but even basically what Laura and team were like, hey, we've evaluated these, this is what we think is good. And trying to get the AI to kind of match to that data set. And I think one of the things that's so interesting about how unpredictable this is like, so we got to a good place with Messenger, and we're like, oh, we just need to extend that to voice and get a CX sort of voice. We still haven't shipped this. It's like incredibly hard to get the LLMs to evaluate voice transcripts compared to chat transcripts, and it's just this unpredictability of where there's a mountain to climb versus where, oh, actually this is sometimes it moves faster than you expect, and it's just that unpredictable space of where you can hit that. So like the broad topic here is trust, and trust in AI is like this massive topic, but like where do you start of like how you've tackled that with your customers on like that whole issue of trust? How big a deal is it for them? How much have you had to overcome? Or is it like sometimes where we're consumers and we're almost trusting too fast?
I think trust with agents, like it's very much not just do you trust the agent, but like what do you trust the agent to do? And like we're trying to meet people where they are with this, right? Like I think we have an example of this in a feature like Triage Intelligence, which like helps you route your bugs to the right place, to the right team, project, find duplicates, where like if you put effort into giving it good guidance, if you help it like drive to good outcomes, then you might be willing to trust it to do more because you like reliably see it produce the right suggestion and can opt into automating some of that work for you. Or like something like coding agents, where some people have, like some organizations have like more or less rigid code review flows, and we're trying to like build our diffs product now where like you can kind of like adjust it to your workflow, and like it's there alongside what the agents have done for you coding wise, but you can review it very easily and seamlessly and layer on top any sort of human review that you feel is necessary. And I think like when we were shipping agents ourselves, like obviously we need to make them as trustworthy as we can and like make sure they don't go down the wrong track. But I think also like you need to, once you have built something like that, help users develop that trust and like see that the agent can do what it is able to. And that usually takes a little bit of time where like you don't give it as big of a blast radius, where you give it like some space to show to the user what it can do without it being able to break things or like do anything dangerous, just so they can develop the trust in the agent to do what they've set it out to do.
Yeah, for us, trust is just built on that last point of like the smaller blast radius. Trust has been like a multi-year journey to get customers to trust Intercom at scale. And some get there way faster and some are way more conservative. We have like involvement rate. How many of all your conversations do you put Fin on? So we have a real easy barometer to kind of measure that. But it's taken us a while to give the right tools for customers to get there. Like it starts with like, transparency, as you kind of mentioned in there. But like, I'm trying to think of and then we built in CX score, which is trying to, hey, we'll rate all of these. But they're like, well, that's helpful, but still not quite enough. And then we're like, okay, we'll give you CX score reasons, and this details one level down because, hey, sometimes this is bad because it's a product issue, not the support issue, or it's a policy issue. And they're like, yeah, and so what like monitors is basically like, no, it needs full customization. You know, product people are like, we don't want you to be able to customize the hell of it. Like this will make it more complex. And interestingly, it's like when you open up that door to customization of how someone does it, you also can't protect the rigor of what your customers are doing there. So for CX Score, we can control it. We can control that rigor, protect it, and make sure that it's hitting the bar we want. But if a customer is doing, if you just enable them to do their, hey, just set up your own criteria there, we can't ensure they're actually evaluating that, and they're not going to nearly sweat it as much. But everyone needs their distinct ways to set things up. And you know, we're in a world where everyone now expects customization for everything, and the demands will keep increasing for that. Where else is trust, like any other places where trust has hit or been hard for you guys and the product?
Yeah, I think like the automation, like to your point, is a good feature. Like we've built triage automations recently where like users can basically set up an agent that can do something automatically when bugs land in linear and like help, I don't know, route it or research it, or maybe like we have some users using it for like translating to the language that their support team supports and things like this. And I think like customization there, like the entire feature is basically customization. It's people setting up a prompt for the agent to do, and they're going to do it like hundreds of times, thousands of times a month probably. And like we need to give users in that case some of the same tooling that we ourselves use to help them evaluate what their instructions are doing to the agent's output. And I think like we can learn ourselves from what works for us here, right? Like metrics help, but also the ability to introspect the trace of the agent. It's like noise if you see it on every single issue, but if you're going through and like trying to iterate on helping your automations work correctly or like trying to figure out where it went wrong, then you similarly need like some ability to introspect it and see what it's doing wrong and how you can improve your side of the prompt. And then sometimes it will be our problem, and sometimes we need to like help you out there, and like there might be pitfalls in what we have built, but I think also like the user prompt here matters a lot. So we need to give users like powerful tools to iterate on that and work on it. And I think like that's probably true for Finn as well.
Yeah. How do you handle that as a product builder of like this isn't our problem, but we know it's our problem generally, but it's kind of the way you've used it that's causing this. Like how have you navigated that issue?
And I think like we have a stance on what we think like are good agent use cases, but that stance is like continuously expanded by what we see users do, right? Like everyone has super bespoke use like workflows, and they're using agents also to do workflows that are like viable now, like a level of customization that's viable now in a product, because you can just write text and see the agent do what you want it to do. That was not viable before, or would have like required a plugin architecture and like weird integration building. Like everyone can basically customize some parts of their workflow now very bespokely, and we try to like make it flexible to that. But also like there's things that we like ideally would like not see the agent do, or like that don't really make sense. And like there has to be like a line somewhere where we like of flexibility, where this is probably the point where like the agent's not built for it and you should be using an integration, but that line is constantly moving as LLMs get more advanced and like the technology like moves with us to like be smarter and more agentic.
Yeah, the idea that we need to give our customers the tools that we use to build resonates a lot. Like almost so much of the software, it feels like it's implicit of like our customers are turning into engineers and using our own software. They're turning into product people, and so that we've thought of like, hey, we almost need to think of Finn of like this is the software development lifecycle, and keeps shifting a lot with where technology goes. But like one example for us is so procedures, which is how our tool for helping you manage complex refunds and complex stuff, multi-step business logic. And how do you get confident on that? How do you trust that this thing is actually working? Is we're like, oh, we need to. What we use is simulations, and you have like it's crazy, right? It's like there's a synthetic conversation, and you set it to LLM. Here's the end user I want you to be. Pretend you're that end user. Now apply the rules that you've just done there. Now here's the judge. I want you to be the judge, and here's how you want you to evaluate that. So you have like 3 roles that you set up to LLM, and which is what we had done internally, and that's how you give them the tools to like iteratively build up and get to that point of confidence. And so it's is there more where you feel like you've brought what you've done behind the scenes and basically exposed that out to customers?
And I think like we also internally, right, like Linear is a product for builders by builders, and like we work with everything we build, all of the agentic features a lot day to day, and like we use coding agents and our own like agent platform where like external coding agents can integrate with Linear. We use them a ton internally, and like consistently try to like bring that workflow to something that helps users iterate with agents more quickly. And I think like code reviews or diffs is like a very good example of this, where like it's a feature that very heavily scratches our own itch. It's like something that we at engineering like love to use because it makes it so much easier for us to ship faster and like see that what we're building is like right and that the agent's on the right track, and that we can steer the agent together with the change that it produces. And I think like a lot of what we're building on the AI front is just like us helping ourselves and builders like us like be able to build product more like easily with agentic features, like agentic products.
Can you explain the diff more, like what you're building there?
Yeah, so like basically what we're building is code reviews. It's like what you would go for like to GitHub for, like to cut a pull request and see what the changes are, comment on it with your team, have AI code reviewers look at it and land the change. And like this very like deeply integrates as well with the agents, the coding agents integrations that we have, where like they are just producing diffs and they might not yet be a pull request when they're done, but in a world where sort of all your code review lands in Linear and where you can see like the code outputs of agents and humans alike there, like working with an agent just kind of collapses to being able to see the diff that the agent produced, comment on it, and steer it in the right direction. So like we're trying to like make that workflow as seamless as possible, where like you can, building products with an agent's never like usually not one shot beyond a certain side of change, but like the more of this you can do without context switching continuously and without like having to pull together different data sources, the easier it becomes. And I think like having the diff the agent produced and that humans produce inside of Linear makes it just a lot easier to stay in the zone and like review the outputs without having to like jump between different tools.
How do you think about that oversight, and is that and the human's role in that? Is that something you're progressively looking to step humans away from, or like that place there that you're talking about of reviewing the output? Is that like a temporary thing to build that trust, or ongoing? How do you navigate the human oversight of the agent?
I think it's very much about like where do frontier models go. Like a lot of what agents can do right now is like dictated by the capabilities of the underlying model. I think if we expect that the level of trust you can have in the underlying model to produce code or produce like help you build in ways that you yourself would, or like that meet your standards, the more hands-off you can be in this. But it like depends a lot on not only the underlying agent, but also like have you built a code base or like a product where it's easy for the agent to iterate within it. So like it will always be a little bit more flexible. Of like some customers might be willing to go completely hands-off already and not review any of their agent's code. Other people might not be like willing to let agents like write any code without a human like double checking and another human signing off. All of that's like a sliding scale, and it's going to like keep changing as agents get more capable. And I think like we can assume that some human oversight like is still necessary for a lot of companies in the short term, but it might change very much in like the way that people review the artifacts. Like it might be that you're much less involved in like reviewing everything line by line at a certain point and just review like a preview build or like see if what the agent build works more so than if the code is correct, if it reaches a stage where like the code is always great. And I think like it's just progressively about taking away barriers that to like being able to approve the agent's output, which depend a lot on the agent being good, but it also depends a lot on like having the right tools to like build trust that the agent is correct, and then progressively give some of it away and like let the agent be more autonomous.
Like you mentioned, this sliding scale of your customers and the level of oversight they want. Is that something you deliberately have built in, or kind of organically come in? How do you operationalize that sliding scale of oversight?
I think it tends to be like people already have setups for this usually, right? Like they have some kind of rules or like protect what people can push freely onto the master branch, or what they can merge without like having another engineer approve it. On the product side, they might have more or less process around like what can you ship to production without getting explicit sign off, what kind of feature flagging do you need. And I think like as a product, like there's ways you can do that, like basically that match the way your organization works already, but we also want to like facilitate you moving towards being like letting the agents be more autonomous if that is the way you're trying to head as an organization, or like what you're trying to achieve. And I think like it's very much about like finding good workflows that work regardless of where you are in that process, but helping people like get further in like that autonomization process if they want to.
How much do you think this actually just maps to a human working with a human, and that's what a human's like with an agent, where you start with like a lot of oversight and then effectively gradually take your hands off the wheel? Does that metaphor hold up for you in what you're seeing here?
I think it is deeply similar. I think the one thing that's missing right now from agents that we haven't really seen as much development on, right, is like them like persistently learning from what they're seeing, right? You can't like point an agent at your code base and then read through it, and then next time around you can trust that it has read it like you can with a human, right? Like if I'm working with another engineer, I can like point them at a file in the code and trust that hopefully next time they like have internalized some of that and might like have learned the patterns and kind of know how to refer back to this. Agent memory is not quite there at the moment. Like it tends to be very flaky and fuzzy. Like your example before, I think like with coding agents, it's very similar, where sometimes it helps, but sometimes it also like tremendously hurts because the agent remembers something that doesn't matter in a certain context. And I think like for it to be truly similar to working with a human, like we have to move to a place where an agent learns like a human, where it can like see the patterns in the code base and like consistently do the right thing based on what it has seen, rather than having to relearn from scratch every single time what your code looks like, where things live in the code base.
Or we have to almost codify that for the agent, right? And skills and tools, and kind of like we have to give it that so it references those learnings each time, because it won't learn on its own.
Yeah.
So what surprised you most designing for AI quality observability?
I mean, I think like what surprises me most, or like what tends to be the most interesting stuff to work on, is when an agent makes mistakes in a very like in a way where you like look at the trace, like the things the agent did, and you see immediately that, oh yeah, I see where it got that from, and I can see why it would make this mistake. It's just not how any human would have ever made that mistake, because like the interpretation that the agent has of it is just like, it just makes no sense. I think like those cases tend to be the most fun, because you're kind of almost like trying to reason about, like have like a theory of mind for the agent, like try to figure out why does the agent work and think a certain way, and then try to build like tooling for it to not make the mistakes that it's making, and like lay out the path for it more clearly, or like figure out what's confusing it about that the thing you've set up. And like progressively agents get better at this stuff, right? Like the agentic models that we're using now compared to like 3 or 6 months ago, like it's insane how much more like productionizable they are, how much like fewer crazy things they do. But like when you hit like a bad path in an agent, you still get these like really funny situations where it's just like a human would never make that mistake, but you know, like you have to kind of learn this, like the sort of mistakes that agents will make that a human would not, and engineer for that, which is very different than building like deterministic product features or like building some really nice UI.
The example that jumps to mind for us is how hard it was to not get Finn to not answer something and say, you should contact customer support. And the bits would come up in the quality, and it's like built deep into the model training somewhere, and we're all sorts of hacks to try to get it to stop doing it. So I think the only solution, we just launched our own models, and I hope that is where it will finally stop saying contact customer support, like weird things humans would never do, and it's sometimes hard to even guide the models out of it. Okay, so 1 minute left. Where are things going next? And that's broad. I'll narrow. In this quality space, in kind of this quality observability space.
I think the thing that I hope to see, models will likely keep progressing rapidly. And assuming that that's true, like we should be able to build the tooling around the model, like build a product around the model that makes it possible to give it more and more autonomy. And like I think like the challenge is there, like as you mentioned before, right? Like it's a lot like working with humans, and it will probably get more and more like working with humans. Like we have to try to find ways that it can be faster than working with humans still, like where you can like trust the agent to do things for you and leverage their native speed, but like not have to build up like separate processes or like have to like go through clunky workflows that normally like a UI or like a good product would help you prevent. Like I think we want to see agents get more autonomous, so we should like help people work in ways that allow them to give agents more autonomy as the models get progressively more capable, so that it's not as hard for people to find the happy path to working with agents productively as they would with a human right now.
That totally resonates for us as like that. It's pushing the boundaries of autonomy. For us, it was always Fin answering support conversations. Now it's for our customers managing Fin, and really pushing. And you realize how much your thinking is constrained in ways you don't appreciate, but you've just had years of this, and it's like, oh, whoa. Don't assume you need to do, you need, how many more steps can you do? So you're talking about like the tracing through, hey, something went wrong. We're starting in a loop here of iteration, right? Something went wrong. Why did it go wrong? What are the changes you could make? Suggest the changes, test the change, put that live, validate if it's going. Like that, it's like pushing for, there's a few points where humans need to go in, but that's the loop. And it's like just all of us and getting our customers to go through the product and go through that loop freaking 1,000 times. And then you can start to automate more and more of that. And that's it's amazing things that now feel within reach that previously weren't really even thinking in that shape of things in the space of really 3 to 6 months where that's shifted so dramatically. Okay, we'll switch over. So thanks for that, chat. Okay, go for it.
My question is around the KPIs. So it goes back to the VP of product. So if you emphasize a lot around learning cycles, what's a KPI you measure for the models to learn to that kind of maturity to solve each of these problems?
Can you sharpen that more for me? So if we're optimizing for learning, what are the metrics to
watch for how quickly it learned? Do you have to relearn and all those things? Because there are a lot of conversations around how quickly a model can learn and how effectively it can learn.
I'll have a go first, and then you can go at it. I mean, I would reframe part of it as like the model's not learning in real time, right? You're trying to get the model that's trained and see you're almost adapting the context you're giving that model and the instructions you're giving it to try to get it to act more appropriately. And in terms of like the KPIs for those, we're kind of talking about those. Some of like you guys are going quite qualitatively, listen to your customers a lot. In our case, it's varied for some of those. So like again, the top level metrics that I was mentioning at the start, resolution rate, those are like resolution rate and CX and CSAT, those are like our anchor ones that we're ultimately measuring those changes. I think what you're talking about is the loop. And honestly, like we haven't built this loop in enough. Like it was, you start and you want a trace. Hey, something's wrong. You've got a monitor. Here's something that's wrong. You identified it. Next question is, why did that go wrong? That's where you get like the transparency of like, hey, here's the trace of why the agent acted this way. Okay, now I'm seeing why. That's not what I want. What do I do about it? So then you're like, what are the changes you need to make in that system? And you keep going through, and then it's like, can I validate if it improved it? So like this is literally what we're talking about today. How can we get that little mini loop, that iteration loop? Because it's probably small numbers for that fix. You know, it might be in our world 10 conversations or something that had that. So that's harder to adjust. So we're still trying to figure out those small loops. The iteration is hard to validate in public. But what you can do is, and this is like, maybe you need to backtest it. Hey, rerun against those conversations, simulate those conversations again, but you can actually run the LM against it, right? The model against it. So that's like one way to test it there. But that's, I think this little loops, these little loops are the future. And this is what we need to build in of the small, make it better, and running through that whole, identify it, understand what's on, make it, test it, well, change it, test it, validate it, and then it didn't work, and you just gotta all these loops. We just need to speed up these iterative loops. And so I don't have a good answer to your question. That's a very long-winded way of like figuring out what that validation point is for when it's micro improvements. So I think that's an open question.
Yeah, I think like I totally agree with that, right? Like it's very much about like trying to find what are almost like more probabilistic bugs or like ways that the agent misbehaves. And like if you identify patterns there, like obviously you can like track some higher level metrics of like how satisfied are people with the agent. But like once you get into the weeds of like what's actually going wrong, like it's much more like investigating a bug than it is like optimizing or like hill climbing a metric. Like the labs themselves are doing a lot more for like building the actual models.
Laura, from your perspective, do you have any validation points you use? You spot something that's going wrong, and how do you know it was actually fixed or not?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to things like procedures, we've had a bit more success with that because we know exactly what's supposed to happen and can judge it back against that. But we have so many conversations that it really comes down to looking at, like you were saying earlier, literally looking back at the conversation and judging it again. But yeah, maybe there's more we need to do there.
How much time do you dedicate to humans just reading traces and conversations? And I would separate that into conversations that have been flagged where the agent behaved in a way you didn't want it to, and then just like a purely random sample of conversations where you just want to see how people are interacting and whether the agent is behaving exactly as you want it to.
Like we were saying earlier, like a lot. So both when you're building a feature, you've got to get down to that individual conversation level.
But is that like a few hours a week, or do you have people doing that all day, every day?
No, it's variable. It's I don't have a good answer to it, but I think it's like a required component to get to that individual example, and you need to debug that individual example, and then you need to do it after you've shipped something, because there's still stuff that comes through, and you can like all of these loops, trying to build LLMs to review what's going on here, but everything is like at that almost atomic unit. Well, for us, the atomic unit is a conversation. Of course, there's a bunch of stuff going on there, but I think you can never move away from the atomic unit fully. I mean, you would try to do things in batches and groups and all those, but ultimately it comes down to, what exactly was going on right there? Have we seen that a few times? And now let's fix it. So I don't think that will go away. It's just even what monitors do and what everyone's building their own loops through is you try to like get a group of things, automate a first pass of it, and identify the things that then you need to go in and drill into. So I doesn't feel like that part is going away, because there's always going to be parts to optimize and fix.
Yeah, I think like speaking for myself, I spent like quite a large fraction of, like there's days where I spend like hours or like half the day just staring at traces, like trying it again in the UI, and then like seeing how the agent responds to what I've changed in like on its behalf. Like I think structured review, it tends to be a bit about like where in the cycle of the product are you, like especially when we're out with like early testers, we're super on top of like any bad responses, because like that's where you have like the most leverage still to like figure out like, did you build the right thing, like how can you steer it? But then after that, like it's basically like any sort of bugs that we have. Like at Linear, we're very like on top of, like we have a 0 bug policy. We try to like fix everything that comes in within 7 days. Like that's the exact same for agent misbehaviors. We can't always solve everything. Sometimes it's just the model being not quite smart enough. But whenever we can, we try to like figure out at least what are we not communicating clearly and can we be doing better, which is just like digging through the trace repeatedly, like trying to reproduce what it's doing wrong and like trying to fix what it's like getting like not quite right.
And +1 to like earlier on, that's like that's like your product development path almost. You have the first build, and then you're like, okay, we just got to react to all the individual conversations, try to group them in. But that totally resonates of like that, how it's the majority of the focus at the earlier stage.
When we speak about quality now, it's more attributed to the output of the AI and the process rather than necessarily the user interface. I think like if we had this conversation 2 years ago, it would be all about the user interface, like the look and feel and things like that. So I'm curious to know what you think the future of interfaces is, and kind of with the onset of agents, how have you thought about how your user interfaces come together, but also how they develop in the future.
I'm sure we could both talk about this for a while. Do you want to go first this time?
Sure, yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I think for us, there's still a lot that you can communicate much more densely in a user interface than you can in text form, right? Like we've all like seen walls of slop from AI that you kind of have to like sieve through to get the small nugget of actual information that you want. And like we can try to condense the output of the AI as much as possible, but like there's just things that are best communicated with structured information and like a good user interface around it. I think like the things that you do in a user interface may change a lot. Like there's certainly workflows where that you would do a lot of clicking in the past where like now you just prompt an agent and it'll do it for you, and it's like made a lot more straightforward by having the ability to like steer the agent to take some action on your behalf. But like for consuming of information, I think a user interface is still unmatched in a lot of like cases, and it's more about like building a user interface that the agent can populate with the relevant information so that you don't have to parse the text yourself, basically.
This is a massive topic, super interesting. So I think where we're at is the shape of software is changing dramatically. Who's using the software is changing in terms of as humans or as agents. Who are you building for? Increasingly, we're building software for agents to use. And then where that's happening is also changing. In terms of just the shape of the software, like candidly, we just ship monitors, we ship procedures with we sweated the hell out of the UI. Linear is the top of the class for this sort of focus. And I'm genuinely asking myself of crap, maybe that's almost a legacy way of approaching it, because is this changing? So I'd push even further of for sure some UI will be durable, but it's hard to know which parts. And I'm asking myself of the stuff we're shipping now, that's gonna be different. We need to start asking ourselves these questions now. So we're confronting that question now. We've got a big internal project that we'll talk more about that really is more agentic driven. And it raises a bunch of questions of what UI is, what the shape of it is. Not everything is a chat, but it's what's so interesting. So much goes away of the challenge of UI. A lot of it goes away. Discoverability, explaining how it's using it, working through it. And it's hard to build good UI. We all accept it because we've done it. It's really freaking hard to make it easy to use UI. Like that UI up there probably looked reasonably straightforward. It's just a fair amount of iteration to get it. You guys sweat the hell out of UI. It's really hard to build good UI. And I do think the importance of that is changing. And that's where we're literally asking ourselves now, it may be now it's going where technical capability may be the most important thing, and you have the UI that supports that, and maybe it's an agentic experience that walks you through that. We're still, I think it's this is happening now. So anyone who's confident of the shape of this is probably overconfident because it's so fluid of where it's at, but I think we're in a wave of change of all those things, what software looks like, who's actually using software, and where it's happening. I think right now it's still happening in our apps, but in the web apps, but that too is changing. When will co-work be the primary place where all software is used? So yeah, super juicy, super interesting. It feels to us dramatic change fast in this space. Well, it's so hard to know the time frame. It certainly feels it's the start of dramatic change. We'll see how fast.
Sorry, I was kind of going to ask a very similar question, but I guess I'll build on that point because that's something I find super interesting. Maybe with examples. So we use Linear. I'm a customer of Linear at work. We use Linear in our team. I think in my team, no one's logged into Linear in about 3 months. We record our stand-ups, the transcript goes away and we have an agent that reads the transcript, creates tickets. We then I use the MCP with Claude Code. We have a separate Claude terminal running a loop that will check any PRs and try and match them to tickets. So I guess the Linear specific question is, does that matter to you guys, or is that good that we're not logging? Well, yeah, I guess how important is it that we're not logging in? How are you designing for that in future? And maybe to broaden it all out, how is Finn thinking about that as well?
Yeah, I think like we have to assume that there will be a lot of people and a lot of companies that have more like where agents are sort of the primary consumer of linear, especially like at scale, there will just be like more agents than humans working on products at some point if it keeps progressing like this. And like we have to build for the agent as we build for the human. And like that might take a different shape than it has in the past. And I think like there may be like cases like I think some users are more into like using it, like linear via the agent, and I think that's like a totally sensible thing to do. I think also like it is still helpful, especially if you're like stepping away more from managing the issues yourself, or like like going through the process of tracking things, that like that's sort of more abstracted from you, and an agent maybe doing more of like the sort of the primitive stuff, but like having a hub for the information with some user interface, but with very like first class support for agents to be part of that flow, I think is like a good starting point, and we'll see like where the industry moves and like what's optimal at each stage of development.
Yeah, it feels like the API first thing that's been around for a while, and small number of people actually live that, but like we're almost obligated now to start from last month or something, wherever people have clocked on to that, to build your primitives, assume your agents are going to be consuming it. Here's like one example that was from a conversation this morning, and a customer's like, hey, we'd love if maybe you can have effectively agent-driven product tours. Hey, someone's asking, how do I do this? And the agent knows your DOM and expose that, and the agent can show how to do it. And it's like, interesting, maybe, but why should the agent bother explaining it? The agent should just do it, right? The agent, like, don't bother yourself learning how to do it, but it's never going to be that black and white, but sometimes you'll want to know how to do it yourself. But a lot of a lot of UI I do think is going to wash away, and there definitely be remaining parts of it. I don't think any of us know for sure what that is. So I'm generally looking up at that. I'm like, you probably still need your monitors, basic reporting, basic lists, but a lot of the hooking up, a lot of the connections of things, like, why bother? Just say what you want, and the agent will do it for you. And that's assuming it's happening in the app. And like you're saying, we're not even in the app at all. So it's fun times. Fun times to be building software.
Thank you. It's really inspiring talk. So I got a question about basically you talked a little bit about the agents is not like an engineer. So when it's make a wrong, for example, they made a mistake in a process, and then they wouldn't really remember. They may do the same thing again in future, or for example, you even just give them the wrong document, and then they will just follow the document and make wrong decision and waste like tons of token. Do you think there is a product opportunity, or you think that's a problem will be solved in a large language model iteration?
I think it's a problem that you can solve at the product level, but anything you build in that space is likely going to be consumed by any optimizations at the large language model layer. So like there may well be some things that we want to do here in like the short term, in like helping bring the right context into the right coding agent session, or like help you kind of have a consistent view of where does code live belonging to a project, how do people work together on that. I think like, or I hope that like the large language model providers will like figure out a pattern that lets us like do that more natively. Like it's a bit like trying to have a human that has no memory remember everything by writing stuff down for them, and like sort of Memento style trying to like remember everything that it needs to fulfill a task. It might be possible. It's probably not the most efficient way if there's some way to natively bake this into or layer this onto the models. And I think like everyone wants this to happen. I'm sure it's very, very challenging, but I think it would unlock like the next big leap in autonomy because it's so fundamental to what we as humans do while working.
I haven't heard the Memento example of it. That's a pretty funny thing with LLMs is that with little stickers everywhere. I think the concept of learning is one that's like used differently, meaning different things. And I think really it's the harness, right? So the harness is no one's teaching the models. We just shipped our models, but the next iteration will take a while to build. So our customers aren't doing that. But it's the harness, which is basically the stickers in Memento land. And but that is where, so you're not quite training it, but you're like, hey, it's coming back again with the same base level stuff, but you can shape that differently. And can you kind of adjust this instruction, that tool, so that it's doing this? So that, Like that's where the huge opportunity is. And then, you know, as always, like maybe the models will start to push outwards and up, so you need less harness, right? That's what Anthropic has talked about of like, don't build too much scaffolding because the models will like basically break down your scaffolding. Your scaffolding's getting in the way of the model power. So I think that's the tension of like how much to invest in something that may be not only not useful, but it could be counterproductive because you're getting in the way of the next model's power there.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. Like I mentioned earlier, we have Fin Labs outside, so if you want to take a closer look at some of the Fin products, head on over there. And yeah, stick around for a drink and let's chat and talk a bit more about all the questions we didn't get to. And yeah, thank you so much.